Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of that thing we call Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. It's the best way to interact with the show is right here on YouTube, where all of your comments and everything comes in real time. As a matter of fact, we have comments flying in already. It is John Sapanaro out in Los Angeles, California. My co-host, Matt Ibby Ibanez, holding it down back in New Jersey. Ibby, how you doing, man?
It is freezing today, John. It's raining. I hate it. It's awful, but it's recording day, so it makes me very happy. And I got to say, I'm very excited. I mean, only a couple people are going to understand what I'm about to say, but I didn't realize that I get to do a show with a media personality. How about that one? I am so pumped up to do a show with a media personality. Like I always say on the show, John, stop feeding the trolls. They all suck. Just know that.
Listen, in that particular regard, and of course, everybody who's watching live on YouTube, we see the comments flying in already. What's going on, everybody?
What's up?
Listen, Ibby, in that particular regard, I wasn't even trying to troll. I literally wasn't. I was trying to take the most neutral tact possible.
And I agree, you did.
People who follow me on Twitter, you know that not only do I talk a lot about the Mets, but obviously I talk a lot about the Jets too, because of my other show and my fandom. And it was about the Jets. And I simply said that despite the fact that Aaron Rodgers, among other things, has gotten weirder over the years, the Jet fans should not be upset about the prospect or worried about the prospect of bringing in one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time to try to shoot their shot over the next year or two to win a Super Bowl, because we haven't even sniffed a Super Bowl in 50 years. And we haven't been able to develop a quarterback in 50 years. And a guy simply responded back, he hasn't gotten weirder. And I knew what it was about. It was about the fact that he's, lied about the vaccine and all that stuff. And I just kind of said, hey, listen, I wasn't trying to get political. I wasn't trying to get anything. I'm just saying I used it as a general overarching viewpoint to encompass the fact that Aaron Rodgers is a little bit of a different guy. He's countercultural in a lot of ways. He'd rather be taking ayahuasca than the COVID vaccine. Listen, all of that stuff is fine. It doesn't matter. Left-leaning, right-leaning. I was talking about football. And he's like, I've got you now. And I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't. You're really the most pathetic person I've ever met in my entire life. But anyway, that's it. That's all I've got to say about that. Let's jump in to some of the comments. Welcome people aboard who, a lot of familiar faces here early on. And before we even started, Carlos Ortiz saying, hello, fellow Mets fans. What's going on? We've got Chris Ferraro saying, hello. Let's LFGM. We've got Shay. Hey all, LFGM, Patty and NYC, more of the same. Of course, always LFGM or LGM, whichever way you want to go with. And then some people jumping on, maybe they read the descriptions. Chris saying, if Roland got into the Hall of Fame, put freaking right in. We're going to talk a lot about that. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. Rael saying, hey all, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode because it's a little bit of the doldrums right now. It's a little quiet as far as Mets baseball and the offseason is concerned. So we are going to talk a lot about the Hall of Fame. And Ibby, I want to start by just living the meme, okay? I'm going to start right here.
Okay. There are 10 Hall of Famers minimum on this ballot. Change my mind. And clearly, I think it was Steph this morning jumped on Twitter and asked us if we were going to talk about the Hall of Fame. And I said, yeah, I responded by basically saying both of us got our ballots filled out. Now, based off of what you just said there, that means you marked off 10. I'm sure you saw mine already in, I submitted mine as well for the show today. And I also had 10 marked off on mine. So clearly we have, now if they're the same 10, we'll see in a minute. But clearly we both marked off 10 people and we'll go from there.
Chris saying, great comment here. Rolling on the floor laughing, John, with that sign. Yeah, I figured I could make it digitally or I can just hold it up here on the live stream. Why not? Also, full disclosure, it's because I didn't think about making it digitally until 2 minutes before we were supposed to go live. So it's a lot faster to just write it and hold it up. I was already drinking coffee. It just seemed like it worked. Ibby, it's funny because you and I tend to agree on a lot of points as it relates to Mets and baseball. And sometimes what happens is it leads to very non-controversial TV, if you will, right?
Except Brandon Nimmo.
Except Brandon Nimmo, which look, and a lot of people
wasn't even that bad.
It wasn't that bad. But a lot of people, they look for that, right? They look for the clickbaity, just how can we find a way to drum up controversy? And maybe that's what holds us back. But the fact of the matter is, you and I agree. We actually agree. So I'm not going to pretend like we don't. I got to see your ballot because I had to upload it here. You have not gotten to see my ballot. I will tell you that our ballots are frighteningly similar. for somebody who has not had the opportunity. We did not talk about the ballots ahead of time. The only thing is I got to see Ibby's because I uploaded his and he did not get to see mine because he didn't have to upload mine. But we should start by saying, and I think this is fair, congratulations to Scott Rowland.
Congratulations, yes.
To be a Hall of Famer. But the Baseball Writers Association of America is an unserious organization. Yes. When there are votes for guys like Bronson Arroyo, and, it doesn't say who voted for Bronson Arroyo, but there was one vote for Bronson Arroyo. And then you're going to turn around and not vote for Alex Rodriguez. I use the example on Twitter of not voting for Barry Bonds. Obviously, he's not on the ballot anymore. But if you're not going to vote for A-Rod and you're going to vote for Bronson Arroyo, you have an agenda. You're a joke. You should be stripped of your vote. You're an absolute clown. The entire thing is a clown organization. And there's got to be a better system, because it's fundamentally broken.
Yeah, I have a lot that I have to say about certain players, but the thing that just pisses me off about the entire thing is, number one, just the overall, yes, please like the video. Number one, it's just the overall grandstand that people do with their public ballots now. Now they just take it as an opportunity, like, oh, I'll make my ballot public and I'll make a joke of it because I'm only going to mark off one guy or a random guy or nobody to try and prove my point. And it's also just the lack of consistency. And we've talked about that multiple times on this show when it comes to, it's this idea of being this moral compass as a writer, and you think like you are this gatekeeper and you're the one who decides what level of cheating is proper and what should be allowed. And it's like, well, Bud Selig oversaw everything, but he's a Hall of Famer because he was part of the Brewers at one time and he was great for baseball. It's like, well, he also was the guy running the show when all the steroid stuff was going on, and you're going to tell me that all the steroid guys are not allowed in, but he's allowed in. And then you're going to talk to me about cheaters, and you're going to talk to me how spitballers are allowed to be in, but other types of cheaters are not allowed to be in. There's no consistency. It's just basically who was nice to the writers. They were nice people. Okay. They were answering my questions in the clubhouse. Okay. Those guys get my vote. And
exactly.
And that's bullshit.
Exactly. And look, I really like David Ortiz. Obviously, neither one of us and none of the people watching and listening to us for the most part are not Yankee fans, so we don't have the animosity there, right? But I have Yankee fan friends that, since his career's ended, they're like, yeah, David Ortiz, I hate him as a player, but he's a really likable goofball kind of guy. And so listen, I like David Ortiz. I don't personally care. I've said it on the show before. I don't care about steroid use in baseball. I think baseball's better without steroid use. So I'm happy that they legislated it or found a way to mostly legislate it out of the game. But I don't care that guys did it when the reports are that somewhere between 80 and 90% of the players could have been doing it. So, that to me is when you get into this wishy-washy territory. When David Ortiz makes it in on the first ballot, despite having failed a steroid test.
Yeah.
And Mike Piazza, and this is not a Mets thing, but Mike Piazza and Jeff Bagwell have to wait because they didn't like the size of their forearms or the fact that they had back acne. It's absurd to me. Show me the failed test.
Yes.
The test either matters or it doesn't. Steroids either matter or they don't. So this pick and choose aspect of it, I understand Manny Ramirez got suspended twice for PEDs, and on the second suspension, he quit baseball and went and played in another country. I get that. Is it a good look for Manny Ramirez? No. But Ibby, Manny Ramirez is arguably the greatest right-handed hitter I have ever seen in my lifetime. Yes. The only people you can put in the category are Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols. And they're both going to walk into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. So when I look at it, Manny Ramirez deserves to be in. I don't care. And I know that might be controversial for some of the people listening because I know that some viewers and listeners, they disagree with the steroid sentiment. Yes. I get it.
But I get it too. I get it.
When it comes out of both sides of their mouth, and if that's how you really feel, none of us have votes, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Right.
If that's how you really feel, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. It's the people who do have the votes. It's the John Heymans of the world who say, I didn't vote for Piazza because there were rumors and speculation, but I voted for Big Papi. What?
Right.
What do you mean? I didn't vote for Albert Bell because he was mean. Oh, okay. Well, we talked about it when Roger Clark was on the show. I'm pretty sure that Ty Cobb was allegedly a murderer. Okay?
One of the greatest moments on this show, by the way.
It was a pretty fantastic moment. We have to get Roger Clark back on. But
yes, we do.
Here's the thing. You look at some of these people, and whether or not Ty Cobb actually did what is alleged, Ty Cobb was a bad person. Ty Cobb was a racist. Ty Cobb was trying to keep black people out of the sport. He was beating people. He was getting into fights with fans. Ty Cobb was a horrendous person. And he's in the Hall of Fame. Nobody's ever going to take him out.
Right.
So what, Albert Bell was like a little too surly for you? Albert Bell was also the most feared hitter in baseball for 10 years.
For 10 years. It's like what I did today is I was just looking at some numbers of people that are on the ballot and also who've fallen off the ballot in the last couple of years, whether it be because time has run out or because they didn't get the 5%. And like, there are some names on there. And again, I'm not trying to describe people that have gotten in, but it opens up a can of worms when certain players are getting in. And then you look at other players like, look, maybe we'll talk about it later on, but like the fact that people are bringing up Scott Rowland because he did get in, you see the numbers that he has. I saw a lot of people bringing up Keith Hernandez, and if he was around on this ballot for these types of voters and what they're looking for, he would have a better shot at getting in. I still think in time he might be able to get in with that special legends committee or whatever it is. I think he might have a shot. But yeah, there are certain players where it's just like, and it comes back to that consistency aspect. I don't understand how certain players have fallen off. And I'm going to give you one that just fell off recently, who was on the ballot once, and he was off that year. Former Met, I got a little figurine of him over there. Former Met, majority of his career in Toronto. Carlos Delgado, to me, is incredible. He was one of the most feared first basemen from an offensive standpoint. Sure, he wasn't the greatest defensive guy. I get that. But one of the most feared offensive juggernauts from the left side for a decade. You look back at the numbers. We're talking – you look at the numbers, and it's a guy that was getting well over 100, 120 RBIs on a given year. His OPS plus was through the roof. You look at his career numbers, you're like, how is this guy already off the ballot? I'm all for, and I'll explain my ballot once we get to it. Some of the guys that I did checks for, I marked them off as a vote. Some people are different than others. And what I mean is some are bona fide, in my opinion, Hall of Famers. Other guys, I like to check off to make sure that they get their cases looked at moving forward in case they don't have enough when it comes to the percentages. So I like voting for that guy. And I think there were two people in particular. I might have to look at it again, but I think there was two that I did that for. So like, I don't understand how a player like Carlos Delgado falls off in 1 year. I love Johan Santana. He shouldn't have fallen off in 1 year either, but he did.
And,
I don't understand.
In fairness, Santana's probably not a Hall of Famer, whereas Delgado probably should be in. But you're right. He shouldn't be neither one of them should be so dismissed.
Thrown away. No chance. Like, bullshit, man. Like, some of these guys have really damn good numbers. In the end, maybe they're not Hall of Famers, but there's no reason why these certain players should fall off the ballot that quickly, because I know a huge argument for people is always, did that person dominate when they played? And I can say with conviction for at least a 5-year period, maybe 7-year period, Johan Santana was the best pitcher in baseball. Or if you don't want to say it, you could say the best left-handed pitcher in baseball if you want to go that route instead. Either way, the guy did dominate, and for him to fall off that quickly, I think is stupid. And that's not even a Mets thing, because he probably would go in with a Twins hat on. It doesn't even matter.
I mean, look, when you look at like what Chris said, Mike Puma wrote, well, some feel unless you played, you can't vote. So if he wrote, I haven't died, I can't write an obituary, what the F is this logic, right? Like, and that's the thing. I'm not taking these guys to task, and I never have for, oh, you didn't play in the league, because I didn't play in the league either, right? Like, so I don't think that, the writers don't have a say. I think the writers have a very important say. They cover baseball on a daily basis. The problem is, Ibby, one, some of them maintain their voting privileges despite the fact that they have not covered baseball in 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. That's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is I don't like gatekeepers. Period. I don't like gatekeepers in any respect, in any walk of life. And I don't like someone telling me that because they cover the sport, they know more than me, or they can sit there and say, oh, your entire childhood, Ibby, doesn't matter. Like, and that's what they're doing with these steroid guys. They're keeping guys out who are the most dominant players of an era that we grew up watching. Yeah. And what, that era just goes away in obscurity. So like, look, A-Rod's a clown. A-Rod's weird. I'm happy A-Rod didn't buy the Mets. I'm so happy. He's so strange. His Instagram posts are so cringy. it doesn't change the fact that A-Rod is one of the best players to ever play Major League
And
Baseball.
we wish he did play as a Met. We do wish
Correct.
that happened.
I wanted him on the Mets. I
wanted
told him a couple weeks ago on this show, I said I would have given him a private jet. I would have given him a helicopter pad on the roof of Shea Stadium. I don't care. Whatever he wanted, I would have done to get him here. He was the most dominant player in baseball. Then also, what about all the moments, the good moments of A-Rod? Like, what about when he switched positions with Cal Ripken Jr. in the All-Star game? Like, are we just all supposed to forget that stuff happened, or we can only celebrate half of it? We can only celebrate Cal Ripken Jr. because by all accounts, he's a good guy and did everything the right way. Yeah, I'm not saying that these guys don't have things to be ashamed of in their careers. A-Rod does. Manny does. A lot of these guys do. They're not infallible. They're not robots. They're not machines. They're human beings who made mistakes. But the bottom line is they're still great baseball players, and that's really all that matters. Unless you're, like, if you do something terrible like Aaron Hernandez did, right? Like, if you do that, then you don't get to go to the Hall of Fame. I understand that. Rael saying Hank Aaron confessed that he probably would have used steroids if they were available. Bigger contract, more money. And I think that's what you're seeing from a lot of these older guys where, look, they're looking at it and saying, I mean, I don't know. I'm happy I wasn't in that situation, right? I'm happy I wasn't presented with that. And that brings me to baseball and BBQ's point. Should the electorate be opened up to broadcasters and others instead of just the Baseball Writers Association of America? And Ibby, before we give our ballots, let's just react to that question.
I think I just want whoever it is, if you want to open it up to more people, I'm fine with that. I'm with you, John, when you also said, like, I want active people within the game still to have a vote, not people who hold on to that vote because, it's my right. I earned this at 10, 15 years ago. I'm still going to keep voting. It's like, I want people that are relevant within this game now. I want people with the proper mindset. I still believe that as the game ever continues to evolve and what people are looking for, and you're seeing in terms of the percentages, how the voters are going with certain things. Certain players are getting more and more percentages every year because they're looking deeper into the numbers and how they want to go about, zeroing in on what exactly they feel are Hall of Fame numbers in a sense. So I like that. That is changing, at least, because it's going to give certain players down the road a better shot of getting in, which is a good thing. But I just want consistency, and however I get that, I'm fine with it. Whatever you choose to do, however you choose to vote for this, just be consistent. You cannot tell me that one cheater is less than another cheater and that he's allowed in you can't do that. You either put the people in or you don't. No matter what, I'm fine with either way. Mm-hmm. Just choose a way and stick with it and be consistent with it. That's really my stance on that.
I agree with that, because if you're going to say that there is a disqualifier built in that if you ever test positive for steroids going forward, you're out of the Hall of Fame. Your candidacy is null and void. You don't even appear on the ballot. Fine. I disagree with that, but fine.
Yeah.
But you can't go back in time and rewrite history.
No.
It's like when they strip NCAA football teams of the title. It's like, dude, we all watched it. I watched Reggie Bush win the Heisman. I don't care if he still has the physical Heisman. I watched Reggie Bush do it. I watched USC win the championship. Whatever, Kentucky, pick your team. Like, stop it. We stripped him of the title. Okay, well, then what? People are supposed to still give a shit about March Madness the next year? Right. You're stripping guys of titles. It doesn't make any sense. Rael saying yes to BBQ about other people getting involved.
Yes.
Chris also kind of seconding that. And I agree with this stance. Writers should be involved. It shouldn't be just them. TJ saying these writers should be thanking the steroid guys because without them boosting MLB's viewership, Heyman and Sherman would be selling life insurance, not writing about this great sport. That is 100% accurate. And Rael also saying, I trust Gary Cohen to be more unbiased than Andy Martino, which is a good point. That is an absolutely great point. So Ibby, let's jump in. By the way, everybody watching this is Till Mets Do Us Part. We're live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday, usually right around, if not on 1 o'clock on the West Coast and 4 p.m. back on the East Coast. So best way to interact with the show is live. So turn those notifications on, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you never, ever, ever miss a moment, and give us those thumbs up if you like what you're seeing so far. Ibby,
thumbs up.
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to reveal your ballot first?
Well, I'll say this. Are we going to go Are we going to reveal and then break down? Like how are we going to go about this exactly?
So I think we'll reveal each other's ballots. Like one, I'll reveal yours, let's say, and then you'll have a chance to just kind of give me an overarching viewpoint. Then you'll see mine, and then I'll do the same, and then we can kind of go back and forth. And of course, we'll get comments from people along the way in the chat. So I think, we're not going to do a deep dive on yours and then hide mine for 20 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, all right.
Perfect. So keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we did not see these ahead of time. We did not talk about this with each other ahead of time. And also keep in mind, these are just our opinions and neither one of us have a vote. So if you disagree strongly, it doesn't matter because we ain't voting for the baseball.
Well, I know Rael's not going to like mine, but that's okay.
All right. Well, here comes Ibby's ballot. Ibby, I'm going to put it up on the screen and just, kind of talk us through it real quick.
Okay. So clearly, like I said before, I did have 10 people, like John mentioned, a little
which is the maximum, by the way,
right? Which is the max, and I thought these 10 guys deserved to get a vote, be it from the idea of their actual play, or because I thought that their candidacy should be extended more. And I want to make sure that those percentages stayed up. So that's why you're seeing names on there like a Bobby Abreu. Do I think Bobby Abreu is like a slam dunk Hall of Famer? No, but I do think his case is going to keep on climbing because it has over the last couple of years. His percentages have gone up. Obviously, everyone knows on this show my feelings on Carlos Beltran. Todd Helton, I'll talk about in a little bit. Andrew Jones, Jeff Kent is a freaking Hall of Famer. I don't care what anybody says. Manny, A-Rod, slam dunks. Gary Sheffield, slam dunk. Billy Wagner is obviously, I think he's a year or two away from finally getting in. And then Scott Rowland, I did mark off, but I do have some thoughts on Scott Rowland as well. And I would say that along with Bobby Abreu, Scott Rowland would have been my vote as a guy that I wanted to see still have a shot on the ballot, not so much as me saying that this guy is a slam dunk Hall of Famer.
A lot of people, Rael saying, I'm prepared, Ibby. I'm prepared to go to war over, your Carlos Beltran disagreement. Let's call it that. And Shay saying, fair ballot. So I guess I'll show mine and we'll kind of go through it. Like I said, Ibby, very similar. And as I put it up on the screen, you will see that we only disagree on one player. I did not pick Bobby Abreu. And I went with K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez.
That's
everybody else we agree with 100%, including Scott Rowland, who did get in. And for me, Ibby, that's what's going to make this conversation so fun. And I think that's also what shows how much of a travesty the voting process is. And that's why, all jokes aside, I had this sign at the top of the show, because to me, there are a minimum of 10 players that you can vote for some reason, whether you want to keep their candidacy alive, like you said, or if you think, like I said, they're just straight up Hall of Famers. And we'll dive deep on each of them. Carlos Beltran, Hall of Famer. Todd Helton, Hall of Famer. Andrew Jones, obviously. Jeff Kent, Manny Ramirez, A-Rod, we already talked about a little bit. When I look at somebody like K-Rod, I look at the fact that he has the single season saves record and was the most dominant closer in baseball for a stretch of time. And there's not that many closers in the Hall of Fame because it wasn't a position of value for 108 years or something. So, it's not even a situation where I think this is kind of BS, but you go, wow, it's pretty saturated at that particular position. That's what everybody always says about Keith, right? They look at Keith's candidacy and they say, well, he didn't hit for power as a first baseman. It's like, that's kind of nonsense. And I make a similar case, but a stronger one for Billy Wagner. And obviously we agree on Gary Sheffield as well. So, there's a lot of overlap when you look at that. And then let's just jump back into the comments here. Chris Ferraro saying no love for R.A. Dickey. Plenty of love for following it up with a laughter emoji. Plenty of love for R.A. Dickey. But yeah, I mean, listen, not a Hall of Famer, simple. And I think when you look at a lot of these people, Ibby, I think I don't know. I don't even think the people that we marked off, I stopped because I had to choose K-Rod between K-Rod and Bobby Abreu. And I went with who I thought has the stronger actual case to be a Hall of Famer, right? But if we were allowed to put 11 names on there, Bobby Abreu I would have marked him off as like a let's keep him alive kind of case. Yeah. So, we're not even that far off. And to me, that's why this is so egregious. There's so many names on there that just should be in. There's no question.
Yeah, look, I know the biggest thing for a lot of people that complain about the Hall some people are a lot more stricter when it comes to what they feel a Hall of Famer is. Like I was having a back and forth conversation with a coworker today.
Was it Mike Francesa?
No, big baseball fan. And I showed him the ballot and I said, look, because he was freaking out because he was like, Scott Rowland's not a freaking Hall of Famer. Like he was going off on it today. And I showed him like, look, here's the ballot. Who are you voting in on this ballot? And I think he gave me, he said no steroids. He didn't take the steroid guys. And he said that he would go with, he said Beltran, he said Helton, and he said Kent, and that was it. He said, those are my three. Those are the only guys that I feel were dominant, and those are the guys that would get my vote. And I understand that thought process, but like he was also diving in deeper, and he was just like, oh, no one, like when I mentioned, well, what about, I said, would you give a vote for Bobby Abreu? He goes, nobody ever bought a ticket to watch Bobby Abreu play. And I was like, well, now we're going to ticket sales? That's
Listen, that is, jokes aside, that is a fair thing to attach when you're talking about like a
transcendent player.
Yes, yeah. Like a Hall of Fame worthy player. Because
right.
Like I'll just bring up one of the ballots. Doesn't matter if it's yours or mine. Look, obviously people aren't buying tickets to see closers, right? But
right.
like Carlos Beltran, appointment TV, Andrew Jones in his heyday, appointment TV.
Right.
Like people weren't buying tickets to see Jeff Kent, but I think it's because of, Jeff Kent's like facial hair choices and the fact that he was like a mean prick. You know what I mean? So like, I think like he just wasn't a guy
who the mustache.
I just think like, I think he looked like a guy that people didn't want to gravitate towards. Like he looked like a guy from like, he was a more of a throwback player and didn't want to be involved in any of, and it didn't want to be involved in like any of the new like promotions of stuff. And so I'm not saying that's a be all end all, but I do think that's a fairly good indicator when you're like, wow, I really got to sit down and watch this Bryce Harper at bat. Like I was just flipping through the channels, but I guess dinner can wait, So I think Bobby Abreu from an offensive standpoint, that is a fair critique when you're talking about transcendent players.
Yeah, so I understand that. So when people are like the big thing is now is you see in the comments on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you get your information, like everyone's like complaining and saying, oh, it's not the Hall of Fame, it's the Hall of Good. It's like it's settling for these lesser players, and it's just like, look, are there players that I feel shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame? I do, and this again, this comes back to the whole process of certain players that you're choosing to put in, be it the actual vote or the committee vote or whatever. Like everyone is always going to come back to Harold Baines, and we just mentioned Scott Rowland. We just mentioned Scott Rowland, and I said before, like I think I got it here. I think it was John Harper who put it out today, just talking about certain things like in comparison to third base, first base, Keith Hernandez, Scott Rowland. He's like, Keith had a lower WAR than Rowland, but he had more Gold Gloves. He had a higher OPS. So it's like you're opening up the doors for all these things.
MVP and 2 World Series to 1.
Right, and I think another one that I saw in my group chat today was Scott Rowland didn't have I think he had over 160 hits in a season once, and he never had a top 10 or top 15 finish in an MVP. Meanwhile, Keith has an MVP. It's just like these little things like that. You open up the floodgates for more players, and that's where I think that conversation becomes, well, I thought it was the Hall of Fame, not the Hall of Good. It's like, well, once you let a certain player in, it's going to open up the door and say, well, wait a second, Keith was better than Rowland, if that's the way you feel. Or I'm talking about Carlos Delgado. Like, if you were to say to me, hey, who's a Hall of Famer from when you watch baseball, Scott Rowland or Carlos Delgado? I would say to you, Carlos Delgado. Like, that's what I would say. But I also understand the importance now that voters are putting on defense, and Scott Rowland's one of the greatest third basemen from a defensive standpoint that's ever played. So it's like he has that going for him as well, whereas Delgado was a bit of a butcher at first base, but he provided the offense. It's like give and take. But if you were to ask me, I would have probably chosen Carlos Delgado. Meanwhile, one guy's in the Hall of Fame after 5 years, and the other guy is off the ballot after 1.
Yeah, let's jump back into the comments. Rail saying, yes, Billy Wagner, his numbers deserve it. Chris Ferrara saying Andrew Jones and Gary Sheffield were feared in their time. Absolutely. Then we've got a couple comments about the, nobody ever bought a ticket to see Bobby Abreu. Shay saying that's an interesting point, but yeah,
that's true.
TJ saying asses in the seats should matter too. Rail saying cancel my appointment as far as that goes. And then Carlos Ramos really picking up what I was putting down when I was talking about Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent just looks like the cop that doesn't let you get away with a warning. Just saying, that's Carlos. You and I are seeing eye to eye on what I meant about the appearance of one Jeff Kent. Okay, all jokes aside, let's deep dive into some of these guys after the break. We're just about 30 minutes, so we might as well do that now. We're going to try to transition over to some Mets-specific conversation, too, in the back half of the second half, but we may not get to it. We may. Let's see where it goes. I think this Hall of Fame conversation is fun. Besides, we only really get to do this once a year. So, we're not going to be dissecting this again next week and the week after that. So I think it's best to just kind of put this conversation to bed one way or another. So, whatever happens in the second half is going to happen. But if you're watching it live, it's a quick break, just an ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Tilt Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. We'll be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back live on YouTube, live on Twitter with Tilt Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, and of course, watching us live on YouTube is the best way to interact with the show. All your comments, your questions, your hilarious jokes, everything like that comes in real time. You get to be a full-fledged participant in the show, but of course, if you don't have the time to do that, you can watch the entire episode as soon as we are done over on our YouTube channel, which is called Till Mets Do Us Part. You should also follow us across social media at Till Mets Do Us Part, and you can see our individual handles there on the bottom of the screen. You should follow us there too, especially if you like when I yell at people for no reason because I have a big mouth and I'm at the airport and I don't really know what else to do with myself, all that stuff. And if you can't do any of that, but you love the show, you can listen to the show as an audio version starting tomorrow morning, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. So, Ibby, I think we can dive into a little bit more of, these guys. I think there's some of them, I think, the cases speak for themselves, right? I'll just pull up your ballot. Right. I don't think we need to do a deep dive here on Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez. You either care about the steroids or you don't.
Or Garrett or Sheffield. No.
Or Sheffield. Yeah. I mean, he's got 500 home runs. I think he's the only guy who has 500 home runs or more that's not in the, of the steroid guys. Now, that used to be like an automatic way in. I think you either care about steroids or you don't. If you care about steroids, they're out. If you don't care about steroids, they're in because you have no fathomable case to make for keeping out Gary Sheffield, Manny Ramirez, or Alex Rodriguez if you don't care about steroids. So I will let you take someone else on your list, whoever you want. And we could probably leave Scott Rowland off because he's in. But I know you have some things as it relates to other players, as do I. You mentioned some of the stuff about Keith already. So anybody on your list that you want to have a little bit more of a conversation about, floor is yours.
You know exactly who I'm going to go to. I'm talking to you, Rael. Let's talk about Carlos Beltran right now. All right. Look, I knew right off the bat, I knew that he wasn't going to get on the first ballot. Even if this whole thing didn't happen with the Stros in 17, I still question if he would have even gotten on the first ballot. But I have always been consistent in saying that Carlos Beltran is one of the greatest two-way center fielders that the game has seen. Okay. And I thought that in due time, he was going to get in, to the point where I even made a bet. I made a bet with a friend that I'm going to hold him to, saying that he thought I was crazy when I said that, give me, within 5 years, I guarantee you Carlos Beltran's going to be a Hall of Famer. He told me no shot. Well, we'll see where it goes. He's got about 45% of the vote so far. We'll see where he goes moving forward because they're going to get wishy-washy with this whole Astros thing. Okay. But
another absurdity, by the way.
Another absurdity because look, there was a whole conversation in my group chat last night as well, complaining about Beltran. Oh, he knew the pitch. I was like, you guys do realize that he stunk in 2017. I would get it more if he was padding his stats and he hit like 40 homers in his last season because he knew every single pitch that was coming. But guys, he stunk in 2017. He was terrible. He was a player coach, and it pisses me off that he is the only person that continues to be blackballed by Major League Baseball. Okay.
It's so true.
He's the only person. You have AJ Hinch, who got a job a year later. Alex Cora got his job back a year later.
Correct.
Jeffrey Luhnow, I guarantee you, will be back in a front office within the next 5 years. It's going to happen, okay?
Didn't stop George Springer or Carlos Correa from getting paid.
No, doesn't stop anybody, but he's the one guy. Bregman will get paid. All these guys are going to get paid, but Carlos Beltran is blackballed, essentially, and I think it's absolute bullshit, okay? He was. He essentially was.
I think to get that, Shay, I'm not sure. I think I read that with the emphasis on was. Like, he was the trash can in 2017. I'm sorry. I try not to laugh and just be like super like professional and handle this like a radio show, but this is like the most hilarious conversation I think we've ever had on this.
But I'll rattle off a couple things real quick because I got it right in front of me. I wanted to see in comparison to other center fielders that are Hall of Famers. Okay, specifically center fielders Hall of Fame. Okay, so I look at a list and I see 10 people. All right, scratch that. 9 people. All right, something a lot of them have in common. All right, Willie Mays, Ty Cobb, Tris Speaker, Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout is at 5. We know where Mike Trout's going to end up at by the time he hangs him up. Ken Griffey Jr., Joe DiMaggio, Duke Snider. Okay, that's 8 names I just rattled off. 7 of those 8 names are in the Hall of Fame. 1 will eventually be in the Hall of Fame if he chose to retire tomorrow. Mike Trout would be a Hall of Famer because he's 5th on this list already, and he's not done yet. Okay, I'm looking at in terms of like this is based off of the Jaws leaders, but also I'm looking at the WAR when it comes to their careers, 7-year spans, basically the big 7 years of their career, a 5-year span, a 3-year span, whatever you want to look at, doesn't matter. The 9th name on that list is Carlos Beltran. Okay, when it comes to WAR, he has a 70 WAR, which is also higher than the likes of Duke Snider, which is higher than people behind him who are also Hall of Famers, Richie Ashburn and Andre Dawson. Okay, the defense
prophetic.
Yeah, the defense.
Compare his numbers to the Hawk. Yeah.
So you have that argument in itself, okay, and then I can bring up the postseason numbers too if I want to. He's one of the greatest postseason hitters that's ever played the game, and everyone always bitches and moans. Maybe it's just a New York thing because I'm so used to growing up with Mike and the Mad Dog and ESPN, like all those things. But it always came down to, well, what's the guy doing the big moment? Because everyone's always so much about the clutch and this and that. You look at Carlos Beltran's stats; he's one of the greatest that has ever done it. So when it's crunch time and it's time to win a game, which the name of the game is to win a World Series, he's the guy that you want, and he has had ridiculous numbers, whether it was the Astros, whether it was with the Mets, whatever it may be. Okay, he's put up the numbers. So I'm tired of people thinking that he was just some average run-of-the-mill player. He wasn't. He was the most dominant center fielder for a decade. Okay, take Griffey out of it. Once Griffey was done, and he was done towards the early 2000s, essentially with the injuries when you look back on it, from maybe 2002, I want to say, when Beltran really started taking off with the Royals, and then goes to the Mets, and then he just spans a 20-year career. The guy is a Hall of Fame player. Okay, you can, and again, I think it was look, I don't care for Joel Sherman that much, but he brought up a point last night when he was on with Brian Kenny when they were talking about and he had Beltran as one of his guys, and Kenny was kind of ripping into him, and he basically said, look, everyone talks about the playoffs, everyone talks about postseason, you look at his numbers, they all play, okay, and he also said, regardless of what people think on the off the field, because he's got the Astros thing or whatever, he also brought in Curt Schilling. Look, people don't like Curt Schilling because of his politics and all the nonsense, whatever. But the point that Sherman made was, if you told me that in a game 7 and I got to win, and he says, I got Curt Schilling on the mound and I got Carlos Beltran batting second, I know I'm in a damn good place. And if you can be with that players, if you can be a player of that caliber where you're plugged in and saying, look, I got Beltran up in the playoffs. I don't have to look at the comments right now. I already know where Rael's going to go. She's going to say you didn't get the bat off his shoulders. Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah, everyone always goes to.
He also had one of the greatest postseasons in Mets history before that at bat.
I don't have it in front of me. I want to say he batted like close to like 350 in the playoffs that year. Yeah. Okay, so but people in the comments don't take this as me, Rael, yelling at you, but because you said it, it's going to come off like I am. But people think that they could have hit that curveball. Nobody was hitting that freaking curveball. I don't care how good of a hitter you are. No one was hitting it.
If you want to criticize Beltran for anything in that at bat, there is one thing you can criticize him for. And it's even tough because of the spot, because of 2 outs. You could criticize Beltran, Ibby, more for not swinging at the first pitch fastball, knowing that Wainwright was going to go to the curveball if he got ahead.
I'll give you that. I can give you that one.
Just from a baseball perspective, you got men on base, 2 outs, season on the line, World Series trip on the line. I'm not saying it's easy to pull the trigger on a first pitch in that spot because it's not. And conventional wisdom is going to tell you might want to take a strike there, especially if you're a patient hitter like Beltran. I'm just looking at the Adam Wainwright that came up that year that had a curveball that no one could hit. You knew if he got ahead, he was going to go curveball, curveball. And that's what he did. Second pitch, Beltran offers at it, and he swings over the top of it. Third pitch, he throws a nasty 12-6 dropper that Beltran, after swinging and missing badly on the one before, decides to take, and it breaks in for a strike. So if you want to criticize him, you can criticize him for not going for the first pitch cookie that was right down the middle because he's facing a rookie who may or may not have been too, like the spot might have been too big for him right there. We're talking about a completely career-altering potential at bat for the likes of Adam Wainwright, right? We saw what happened to Brad Lidge, right? We saw what happened to Brad Lidge when Albert Pujols hit that ball off of him. And look, Wainwright's a better player than Brad Lidge, right? But I'm just saying you could criticize him for that part of it. Just to be fair, you cannot criticize him for not swinging at that curveball because it was one of the dirtiest curveballs I've ever seen.
But can we also admit, Rael, can we also please admit that it's ridiculous to subject a player to one pitch for the rest of his career? And I say that only because even with Brad Lidge, without saying like that whole thing, Carlos Beltran has had prior to that and even after that a damn good career, a Hall of Fame career in comparison to what Brad Lidge was doing and what he did after the fact, which was nothing. But the fact that a guy is subjected, basically his entire career for people has been lost in their eyes because of he didn't take the bat off his shoulders in 2006 and he was a big ass cheater in 2017. Give me a freaking break.
Shay makes a good point. Beltran is the type of postseason player that we today would be pissed off for not getting. Absolutely great point. Chris saying, sorry, that curveball in 06 will forever sting. Anyways, shouldn't prevent the Hall of Fame. Fair point. And here's the other take on it when I'm talking about criticism. Carlos Ortiz says, he should have swung. That's all I wanted. I could understand that logic.
To say that,
I understand that logic a little bit more. But yeah, I'm with you, Ibby, on that.
Guys, look, I love baseball. John loves baseball. We've both played baseball, different levels, whatever it may be. Guys, it's so easy to be sitting at a game. And I know it's always going to come down to, well, at the time the guy was getting $127 million, swing the bat. It's just like, it's not that simple. Baseball is hard. I'm sorry, it is.
Criticize Heilman for giving up the lead. Fair.
Criticize Jose Valentin for popping up with the bases loaded. Criticize that.
Also fair. Look, okay.
Let's get out of 2006. It's gone.
I'm going to take a couple guys off my ballot and kind of lump them together really quick because I think it exposes the hypocrisy of the Baseball Writers of Association. And they're guys in the middle column, not named Manny Ramirez or Alex Rodriguez. It's Todd Helton, Andrew Jones, and Jeff Kent. Okay. And when you look at those guys, you look at the totalities of their career, right? And what's one thing everybody always says, take Helton first. You go, wow, I really wish baseball was like it was back in the day when guys stayed their whole career and guys were loyal to teams and guys did the right thing. Well, Todd Helton spent his whole career in Colorado, the team that drafted him. He didn't choose to go to Colorado. He didn't go to Colorado to inflate his numbers later in his career or even on a big free agent deal. He went to a place that he went to, the only place he ever played in. You cannot then hold it against him for not leaving. If you're going to go, wow, I really love that Derek Jeter played his whole career with the Yankees. I really love that Cal Ripken Jr. played his whole career with Baltimore. You can't turn around and say that the greatest player, basically, to ever play his entire career with the Colorado Rockies is a sham because it's in Colorado. That's the first thing. I don't even care about the numbers, Ibby. We could dive into the numbers. That is the argument that pisses me off, okay? He didn't choose to play there. He didn't buy the team and put them a mile high in Colorado. He didn't break the humidor so that he could hit more home runs. He just played baseball in the place that he was drafted to play baseball in. The second guy on the list is Andrew Jones. Everybody looks at dominance versus compilers. You look at Sandy Koufax. He was dominant. He was the best pitcher in baseball for a 6-year stretch, and then that was it, right? Then you look at guys who put up a lot of numbers over a long period of time, like Craig Biggio. Okay, I understand two different, offense versus defense, or, position player versus pitcher. I get that difference there. But when you look at a guy like Andruw Jones, I've heard criticism from baseball writers. They'll say things like, Andruw Jones' first 10 years with Atlanta, he's a Hall of Famer. However, after that, he dipped off a little bit, and we're going to hold that against him. So because he stuck around, but wasn't to the upper echelon of player he was for a decade, when he's maybe the best center fielder we've ever seen, not named Willie Mays or Ken Griffey Jr., also hitting all the home runs, also winning all the Gold Gloves. I don't understand how you can say the 10 years matter, but then the 10 years are irrelevant. Does that make sense? Like, you're taking the dominant stretch and you're discrediting it in the next breath immediately.
And then he would get criticized if he actually, juiced for that back half. He did get criticized for that too. So
exactly. And then the third guy is Jeff Kent. And look, I don't like Jeff Kent. I think all the reports on Jeff Kent are probably widely accurate. Carlos said what he said before about him looking like the cop that won't let you off with a warning. Everybody says that he was a prick. I'm sure he was a prick. But here's a stat that I know about Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent has more home runs than any second baseman in the history of Major League Baseball. Period. He's a Hall of Famer on that alone. If you've done something more than anyone else has ever done in the hundreds of years that this game has been played, you're a Hall of Famer. That's it. That's my argument for those three guys.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't even need to go to numbers. I don't care about war, and not that I don't care about it. Obviously, the numbers matter, but those guys have numbers, is what I'm saying.
Right. And Jeff Kent is also number one in terms of RBIs, and I believe he's top 5 or top 7 for the rest of the regular counting stats. He's a Hall of Famer. I don't care if the guy's an asshole. He's a Hall of Famer. Back to Todd Helton. All right, Todd Helton is. The thing that bothers me about Todd Helton and Rockies players in general.
He says he was bad as a Met, though, talking about Jeff Kent, which is hilarious.
The one thing that does bother me when it comes to the voters with Rockies, it's like a lot of players play in Colorado. All right, a lot of players play in Colorado. Not like if Colorado was this end all be all of offensive powerhouse juggernaut numbers that you go there, you're going to become this freaking superstar and cash out and get all this money. That a lot of people would be doing that, and a lot of people would have, found their way to Colorado and put up these monster numbers that Todd Helton has put up.
And quite frankly, Colorado would be a better team over the last, almost 30 years that they've existed, because people would go there all the time. Like it is still, it's just Colorado. Like, they're not playing on the moon. Like,
And the thing that pisses me off is, to your point, it's like you're faulting a player because you, as an institution, put a stadium in Colorado, and now you play there and you can be great. And it took Larry Walker forever, and Todd Helton, in my opinion, for a 10-year stretch, was incredible as an offensive player. He was damn good defensively too.
I was just going to say, he's an underrated defensive first baseman, especially for the prime of his career.
So the fact that a player is faulted, like you said, for playing his entire career there, but faulted because this is where the stadium was placed and he happens to do very well there. Hey, last time I checked, a lot of players in Major League Baseball, or really any sport, would rather play home than on the road. And a lot of times, regardless of where it is, Colorado or not, numbers are going to be better at home as opposed to the road. And yeah, I got his numbers in front of me right now when it comes to the home and road splits for his career. And is there a difference? Absolutely.
Also, just to be fair, Ibby, like, baseball's a sport of nuance. Baseball's a sport of, we built this ballpark this way. Everybody always talks about the short porch in Yankee Stadium or the green monster in Fenway. And, look at this place. Look how it was built. Look how unfair the Polo Grounds was, where it was, 479,000 feet to center field and you couldn't hit a ball out of there if you shot it out of a cannon. So, like, I understand.
But it was like 210 down the line.
But that's always been baseball.
Yeah.
So again, going back to the point from Carlos Ortiz, Coors Field's a major league stadium. It shouldn't be held against any player.
It shouldn't.
And to your point, okay, so it is a little different than anything that we've seen really before or since, because it's a mile high, the elevation, all that stuff plays a factor. But to me, it's just ballpark factor. So listen, Great American Ballpark's tiny. Guys hit more home runs there. Didn't stop Brandon Drury from getting traded. Didn't stop Brandon Drury from getting a new deal. Like, it is what it is. That's the ballpark.
And now that I'm thinking of it more and more, like I was mentioning, the point I was trying to make before when it comes to Colorado itself, and still needing to be a special player to even have consideration for a Hall of Fame career, which Larry Walker finally attained, and Todd Helton is hopefully going to attain because he fell 11 votes short, which is ridiculous, but whatever. I don't get how. I forgot where I was going. I couldn't find it. I'll find it, but I don't.
Carlos saying by that logic, no Yankee should ever make the Hall of Fame.
Oh no, I got it. When it comes to Colorado, like when you look at players that have spanned the entire existence of the Colorado Rockies, okay, we have two players right now. That was Larry Walker and now Todd Helton. What other player, whether it was majority or a portion of the career, like
right,
what other player are we talking about that has a shot at doing something special and make the Hall of Fame? Is there another player, or are we literally talking about two special players that happen to play there and they put up some numbers? Well, I'm not going to fault them for that. I can't fault them for that.
That's my same argument to go back to the steroids, guys. If we operate under the assumption that most of Major League, and I know I use the word assumption and already it's a loaded conversation, right, Ibby? But if we operate under the assumption that 80 to 90% of baseball, somewhere from the mid to late 80s to the mid 90s and beyond, were using steroids, well then why isn't 90% of baseball players from that era eligible for the Hall of Fame in terms of numbers, right? Like, you still have to put up the numbers. I'm not saying that juicing didn't help Barry Bonds, but I'm saying that he still had to do it. Hey, like, I follow this TikTok account that always reports, they do like daily reports on like how absurd Barry Bonds' numbers were, you know, during his late tenure run with the Giants. And they put up in 2002, his, what do you call it? Oh my God. The stat that's, is it just WAR, or is it B WAR? That's like how better you are than the rest of the league. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
from an offensive standpoint,
yes,
the B WAR.
Yeah. So it was 263, which meant that he was 163 times better, or 163% better than the next closest player, right? That's absurd. That is freakish numbers. The person who was closest to him.
Perspective on that, would be it's like perspective for now, so people can see that it's Aaron Judge was over 200 this year, I believe, for the season that he had.
Right.
And I want to say that the second closest was I'm not 100% sure. I want to say it might have been Yordan Alvarez, and he was only 30 behind. He was in like 170s. So just context.
And the context that they gave, they said that Albert Pujols was the next closest player that year. Albert Pujols was 90 points back of Barry Bonds, which is the same distance. 90 points back was how far away Joe Crede was from Albert Pujols. So
That's
think
insane.
About that math. When you understand
Joe
that
Crede,
Barry Bonds was 90 points better than Albert Pujols, which was the same mark, all-time great Albert Pujols, 700 home runs. Albert Pujols was only, quote unquote, 90 points better than Joe fucking Crede. So like, when you start to look at that, it's just like you can't grade on this scale of like, I don't know, man. Like so many people did steroids. How could you tell? You could tell. Did you watch baseball? You could tell because I watched Barry Bonds take pitches that were a centimeter off the outside part of the plate, which by the way, steroids doesn't help you with. And he would take 2 pitches off the outside part of the plate. They'd throw him 1 pitch to hit and he'd hit it to fucking Oakland. So
with a 32-inch bat. With a 32-inch bat,
So it's insane.
And he choked up. And he choked up on it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's where my conversation goes for those guys. I can't understand the line of demarcation that people put out there. The other 2 guys before we get out of here, 2 guys with Mets ties, I think we should talk about are K-Rod and Billy Wagner, specifically Billy Wagner. But Ibby, I think you can make a case for both of them because, again, the closer position, there's not many closers in the Hall of Fame. What are there, 5, 6, right? It's Mariano, Eckersley, Trevor Hoffman, Goose Gossage, and Fingers.
Raleigh Fingers. Yeah.
It's 5.
Yeah.
So, you got room for him. Give me the guy who has more saves. No, I just mean give me the guy who's got more saves in the single season than anybody else who was also a dominant reliever. It wasn't a flash in the pan. And Billy Wagner is the greatest left-handed closer of all time. Period.
422 saves for Wagner. His K per 9, I believe, would be tops. I'd have to look that up though, but his K per 9 was ridiculous.
He's a better. Thank you. I forgot about some other guys. Lee Smith, thank you, and Bruce Sutter, thank you for those. Yeah, so 7.
But still, and
7
to the Wagner fact of 400 plus saves, the high K per 9. I still think it's incredible that the guy was a righty and learned to throw lefty, and he threw 100 miles an hour. Tops all time. Yeah. So again, it's nuts. It is. And I'm happy that his case is growing. Mm-hmm. And look, you get people like I was talking my coworker before, Astros fan. So he saw Billy Wagner for a good amount of his career. He did not believe that Billy Wagner was a Hall of Famer because he said the guy was never good in big spots. Mets fans could say that too if they wanted to.
I know better in big spots than Trevor Hoffman.
I know. And that's always my go-to. Right. I was like, I don't think then that's the
Billy Wagner was a more dominant player than Trevor Hoffman. Trevor Hoffman has all the saves, but Billy Wagner's a more dominant player over the stretch.
And I agree with that. But that's
right
the conversation.
Second to Rivera in lowest ERA.
I don't understand why people are so apprehensive with him, but that's always their go-to. Where it's like whether it's my coworker there. Whether it's if you guys follow the Mets chief on Twitter, he's always like the anti-Billy Wagner guy. Every time there's a Wagner comment, he's literally in every single comment, saying how much he stinks. But that's always the go-to. How the guy was not good in big spots. He wasn't good in the postseason. That's always what their go-to is. But again, that brings me back to other things. Like you attack people attack certain people for certain reasons. Where it's like, well, if you use that reasoning for someone else, they're like, well, no, that doesn't count. Like, you can't talk about, Beltran's postseason. That doesn't matter. You can't talk about, Helton at home. Like, you can't do that. It's like, well, no, I can because you're doing the same thing for somebody else's argument. So there's too much back and forth. There's two sides of every mouth. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are doing those things are the ones that are actually penning who gets to go in and who doesn't.
It's a great point here from Baseball and BBQ. The save stat is a flawed stat fundamentally because it was built and hasn't been evolved for when the game was different. And so when you just look at saves, again, Trevor Hoffman, I'm not taking anything away from him. Billy Wagner was a more dominant player. And Shea says Billy Wagner not getting in creates a problem for closers who aren't Mariano Rivera. Mariano Rivera is Michael Jordan of closers. He's the Jerry Rice of closers. He's the Tom Brady of closers. Like, pick whatever.
The greatest.
Yeah, Wayne Gretzky. You take that person, that's what Rivera is for the closer position. Obviously, with baseball, you can't say he's the greatest of all time because there's too many different variables and skill sets and stuff. But he is the undisputed greatest of all time at the thing that he did. He's better than everybody else.
Yes.
You could make an argument, Ibby, based on numbers, right, that Billy Wagner is right behind him in terms of that ability, right? Like, I'm not taking away from any of the guys who are in the Hall of Fame, right, in terms of dominance. But based on numbers alone, Wagner is in the top 5, top 6, 7, 8. Like he's there in that conversation of greatest of all time at that position. And so whether or not that's because the position evolved and it's not the same as it was when Goose Gossage was getting in and doing what he did, to me, that's irrelevant because you can only judge the guys by the context in which they played. And they played in the context, like he played in the same context as Rivera. Rivera wasn't going out there and throwing 4 innings like Goose Gossage was. So, when I look at this, I just think it's so complicated. And I think, or it's uncomplicated and they're making it complicated. Right. I think Shay's point is, if Wagner doesn't get in, then who will? Like, who can be?
Especially now, how bullpens are being utilized. Like going forward, like I don't know if there is anybody.
What's going to happen? I don't have his numbers in front of me because he's still playing and stuff. But like, what's going to happen with Craig Kimbrell? Right? Like Craig Kimbrell was an unbelievable best closer in baseball, lights out for a good chunk of time. And now he's kind of bounced around at the end. Like, is that going to be held against him? Should it be? Maybe. I don't know because I don't have the numbers, so I want to be fair there. But, and Shay's saying exactly, like, when you look at guys like that, like, what's going to happen next? So you're going to tell me, like, anybody who's not the greatest closer of all time, like Rivera, or when he goes in, like Hoffman, has the most saves all time. Like, oh, if you don't meet that criteria, you can't get in. That's ridiculous to me. That's ridiculous. And again, you look at a guy like Wagner, he's the greatest. Like, you could sit there and you could say he is the greatest left-handed closer that has ever played baseball. You could make that argument.
I'm just looking at Kimbrell right now, just to get an idea. He's got 394 saves. He's got a K per 9 that is upwards of over 14, almost 14 and a half.
I mean, that's fucking great.
He's the guy. Like that would be the next one but he could be following the same blueprint of a Billy Wagner, where it's like it might take him the entire time. If this is what they're going to do to Wagner, it might be the same case for a Kimbrell, where it's like maybe in time he gets in. And like I'll be honest, like I didn't think of Craig Kimbrell that way until it was brought up when he was a free agent and people were saying, oh, this guy's on a Hall of Fame track. And I was like, wait a minute. And then I looked at the numbers. I was like, holy shit. Like this guy is having an incredible career. He does have a right to ask for this money. He didn't get it, but he did have a right to ask for it because of the career that he's had to this point and where you thought he might be going. But like you say, he's bouncing around now. Is that going to hurt him in the long run? Is it going to screw with his numbers a little bit? I don't know, but you're right. I think it was well put. If Wagner can't get in, the question then becomes, is there anybody else? Because if Wagner is better than Kimbrell, then how does Kimbrell get it? Look, we've seen the baseball writers, they've screwed things up before and put someone in when someone else should have gotten in regardless. They can't get out of their own way. But the point being, if this guy can't get in, how the hell are they going to make this guy a possibility if they won't vote for him when the numbers and like attitude wise, it seems like they're both on the same plane, unless one's a jerk off that I don't know of, but there's no difference there.
And it's funny because I think one of the critiques that you wind up getting into when you start doing what we're doing now and talking about certain players' Hall of Fame candidacies, hell, we've done it already. You mentioned Harold Baines. I mentioned a guy like Craig Biggio, right? Like we're talking about these guys, and I don't want to keep people out. That's the thing. When I do that, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Harold Baines shouldn't be in. Whatever. Put him in, right? But once you do, then you start to look at the people. It's the opposite of what we're talking about here with Wagner. Like if you don't put Wagner in, how could you put anybody else in? It's like if you put Harold Baines in, how could you not put Keith Hernandez in? If you put Scott Rowland in, how is Beltran not a Hall of Famer, right? Like that's what starts to happen. And you look at it, somebody tweeted, I wish I knew who, somebody put like how eerily similar the age through their age 29 season the numbers are between Scott Rowland and Manny Machado. And it's like, okay, well, I guess Manny Machado's on a Hall of Fame trajectory then because look what they're both doing. But it's like, how can you not classify these guys if you've put in these other people? So when I mention a Harold Baines or a Craig Biggio or whatever, or Trevor Hoffman, I'm not saying screw it, get them out. They don't deserve to be in, but it's the opposite argument than the one we just made for Wagner. It's like, look, if you're if you're watering it down for them,
it's the precedent that they're setting.
Correct.
And so it's like if you're going to put certain guys in, you have to open up the idea that some of these guys, and that brings back to my whole conversation before where I was like, well, people are bitching and moaning about, oh, it's turning into the Hall of Good. Well, blame the writers for that if that's the way you feel, because they opted to put certain players in, so it's going to open the door for others. Like, look, someone brought up before, I don't think, David Wright, first year on the ballot next year. David Wright is not going to make it into the Hall of Fame. I love David Wright. We all love David Wright. He's not making it to the Hall of Fame. But when you look at his numbers in the short span, and in comparison to the things that people like to look at is always MVPs, silver sluggers, where they were in terms of the game and the position when they were playing. Yeah, I could argue that David Wright was better than Scott Rowland. I could argue that. Rowland was a much better fielder. I know that. But I could argue that from the offensive perspective. But he's not going to get in. So I understand that. But the fact is, people are going to ask that question. It's like, well, wait a second. He was better in these aspects, even though it was a shorter career. Mm-hmm. But because you put certain players in, it opens up this entire can of worms where it's like people are going to be saying, if you're going to let this person in, you got to let X, Y, and Z in as well.
Yeah, the player that I've always compared Wright to, and obviously I'm going to bring up this person and everybody's going to cringe, but the player who had a similar trajectory career, who was obviously around a lot longer, and then their career was sullied in a different way. David obviously just couldn't stay healthy. But if you look at their track, Ibby, David Wright had a very similar career to Robinson Cano when they first came up. That's the player, the comp that you would look for. And a lot of people had Robinson Cano going into the Hall of Fame before the steep decline and obviously then both steroid suspensions. Right. But if David Wright played as long as Cano did without the issues of the steroids and obviously without his own issues of the back problems, if David Wright continued to put up the numbers that he put up earlier in his career, I think you could then make a case for him being able to be a Hall of Famer. But he just simply didn't play enough. And at no point in David Wright's career could you look at David Wright and say what you could say about a guy like Albert Bell, where it's like, wow, right, he was the most feared player in baseball. David Wright was a damn good player. David Wright, it's such an unfortunate case because I think David Wright, if he just played, the requisite amount of time, I think he would have gotten himself to a point to get into the Hall of Fame because I think he was good enough. He was that caliber of player. Yeah. And he didn't, like Cano, didn't do it to himself, right? Like he didn't shoot his own career in the foot. But I just look at it and I say, man, it just wasn't meant to be, and it's unfortunate. But if you go back far enough with the Mets, look, when Darryl Strawberry came up, there was, you look at the first handful of years of Darryl Strawberry's career, you're like, that guy's going to the Hall of Fame, right? Like, obviously he's going to the Hall of Fame. Obviously Doc Gooden's going to the Hall of Fame. Didn't happen. Now for them, self-inflicted, demons, different than injury. But, for David Wright, it's just unfortunate, but I don't think it's ever going to happen for him.
No, I don't think so either. I think look, and next year you'll have some interesting cases, and I think a lot of these guys will get higher in terms of the percentages, which is a good thing because more people should be getting into the Hall because they are deserving. Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
That's the other guy I was going to bring up. David Wright is a modern day Don Mattingly. I think Don Mattingly obviously more pop than David Wright on a consistent basis. Don Mattingly was one of the most feared hitters in baseball from a power perspective. David Wright, a little bit short of that. Maybe, I don't know if you could say he's a better overall hitter because Mattingly was so good too. But yeah, that's a fair comp. That's a fair comp. I think I use Cano because their careers were at the same time, basically. Yeah. But Mattingly is a fair consideration when you think about position played and also, the back issues kind of derailing everything.
Yeah, but I guess in short, baseball writers suck. The Hall of Fame is a pain in the ass. But this has been a great conversation because look, I like the back and forth, and I also like when we get the opportunity to just talk a little bit about baseball in general, as opposed. I love talking Mets. I can talk Mets all day, but just having an opportunity to talk about something else, even though it's as we always tend to do, the overarching. I don't want to call it hatred. Maybe I do want to call it hatred of what Major League Baseball tends to do to itself, and now the baseball writers in general, how they're always a pain in the ass and always get it wrong. but it's still always a fun conversation. And regardless of what people think about Scott Rowland as a player from the counting stats aspect, the video yesterday, did you see the video when he told his parents?
I did not.
It was an awesome video. It's just him really walking into the kitchen, seeing his older mother, seeing his older father, and just, tears in his eyes, and just says, "Ma, I made it." And then everyone just like erupts, and then he tells the father. Like, it was an awesome moment. It's the thing that any baseball fan loves to see, any baseball player can appreciate. So just seeing something like that is awesome. Props to him. Glad that he got in. Good for him. I understand the arguments against him, but at the same time, I'm not here to break the guy down and say that he's garbage and say he's not worthy. Hell of a career, hell of a guy. Good for him.
Yeah, I can't say anything different as we put that conversation to bed. I think you nailed it. I'm going to go look for that video now because it is something I do want to see. And I think those moments, we talk about it again. I said at the beginning, these guys aren't machines. These guys are people and they're human beings. And so, you kind of lose that human element a little bit when you start just putting their numbers into a hopper and spitting out a piece of paper that says, this is his FWAR, this is his UZR, this is his batting average, blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's a guy who did that, and it's a big moment for that guy, and he deserves to enjoy that moment. I'll kind of give my final thought this way. I had to go way back into the comments. Carlos Ramos said, I saw Jenny has a giveaway of a Hollywood John autograph card. And there are a lot of other comments about Jenny. I do want to let you guys know, after the most recent interaction on Monday, where we went back and forth a bunch, I told Ibby, it's dead. It's done. I'm not going to troll Genny anymore. Jenny, whatever.
Jenny.
Grant. Grant, the guy Grant. I'm not going to troll him anymore. Because I think after doing a bit of troll work, and after really like just kind of hating on him and being sarcastic, I did really give him a good explanation of why I was upset with him and why I think what he was doing was disingenuous. And rather than taking any of that, like he kind of just walked away from it. And it's like, listen, I know I'm not the be all end all. I know that I'm not better than anybody, but I think the reason why I was so fired up about it from the beginning is because I think what he did was really unfair to Mets fans. I think he's in a position where he's got a lot of followers. People go to him for stuff. People go to him on Twitter for news and for breaking things. And he's got a good relationship with Wardy, who we have a good relationship with. So, I basically told, like, it was a lot of like, he was throwing out like, Gen Z talking points at me. Like, dude, you're obsessed with me and I live rent free in your head. It's like, no, dude, I think what you did is disingenuous given the backdrop of everything that happened. I think that it's a little rude for you to just kind of take advantage of the platform that you have and take advantage of Met fans the way that you did. And I think you need to show a little bit of accountability, responsibility, and maturity. And he never responded to that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's over. It's done with. I was doing it, largely because I think he was wrong. That's it.
Well, it's good on you to squash it. Yeah. John's totally triggered. Unbelievable. But I'm glad that you squashed it. Whatever, move on. Doesn't matter. Maybe now we'll get mentioned in one of those Met podcasts.
We never get mentioned in a Jenny poll. I think I torpedoed that, but I don't care.
It's
honestly,
okay. Well, we will try to continue to build our whatever fan base, reach, whatever you want to call it. We'll try to do it on our own, and I'm confident that we will. And I'm looking over at some of the comments now. I'm just Rael, just so you know, not angry with you. Love you. Beltron aside, good stuff always. Not goosing you on anything. Love you. Don't worry.
This is not the time to mention your giveaway now. No, we can't mention it right now. We do have a couple really good giveaways, and what's going to happen is when we say that we're going to do them, they'll actually happen. So, okay, I'm done. And now I'm done. I promise I'm done. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. That's really sweet. I don't care what Jenny says. You're still number one to me. From
there you go. There you go.
Talking
JB.
about us as a show, of course.
Thank you, JB.
No, guys, thank you so much. It's been great conversation. There is, I haven't actually mentioned this to Ibby. I kind of sort of did. There's a chance. So, subscribe and turn those notifications on, because obviously we'll put the stuff out ahead of time, and you'll see like when episodes are scheduled. There's a chance we might not be able to record next week because I am moving and I don't have a ton of time except on Tuesday and Wednesday because of my work schedule to actually move. So I may not be able to record next week, but we will let you know. We'll put it out on Twitter, put it out on Instagram. And of course, if you don't see an episode scheduled on YouTube, then you'll know that that's the case. But Ibby, I'm going to try like hell. I just don't know.
And if we don't, here's an idea. We will post from a video, because I do think we should post from a video standpoint as well to try to get some more traction. We'll post a YouTube video up for our first giveaway to try and get traction that way as well. And if anything, that'll at least be something that the channel puts out. People can see, to join it, to follow the rules, do what they got to do. We'll post it on Twitter as well. But if that's the case, we'll post a video at least that day as a replacement if need be. Regardless, we're going to post 2 at some point, a video and the giveaway, but we'll figure it out.
Couple really good points. First of all, Chris asking, John moving East Coast. No, I'm not. I'm staying here in Los Angeles. I'm moving about 15 minutes from where I live now.
He's always going to be Hollywood. Forget about it. We lost him.
Hollywood John. Rail saying, if you can't record, do a highlight show. Good idea. However, in practicality, that's actually more work than just hosting. I would rather I'd rather take an hour out of the day.
A lot of editing.
I have no ability to do that. And then a couple people saying could have a guest host, could do that if he wants to do it with a guest host. A lot of people saying, do you need a sub host? Sub host. I nominate Carlos. So maybe we could do something where we have a guest host. I'm not 100% sure. Ibby and I will talk about it.
Yeah, we'll figure it out
off air, but I did want to mention that to everybody who's watching now. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is an episode wall to wall with the Baseball Hall of Fame today. But I think it's a good time to talk about it. I think some of the other talking points we wanted to get into, I saw a Mets bullpen comment. There's some more stuff about Brett Beatty and things like that. That can get, as we get closer to spring training, we could dive into all that stuff.
Easily, yeah.
I think it was good to have an episode about this. And now we know that's it. We're done with the Hall of Fame until next year around this time. And hopefully we can talk about some former Mets getting in. But yeah, this has been Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. I'm John. That's Ibby. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.